Liz to start recording. And I can take this opportunity now to welcome everybody to this meeting of the Child and Family Services Scrutiny Performance Panel. I suspect it's going to be the last one that we will have in terms of Child and Family Services before Christmas. You'd be surprised if I told you any different to that, I'm sure, but that means I got to remember to wish you a Merry Christmas at the end of the meeting. So if I do it now, I won't have to make sure I remember at the end, will I? So I'll take that opportunity now. Okay. Item 1 is apologies for absence. Do we have any, Liz?
Yes, we received apologies from Susan Jones, Erica Kirshner and Elliot King.
Okay, thank you, Liz. Item 2 is disclosure of personal and prejudicial interests. Has anybody got anything they want to declare? Okay.
Chair, sorry, Chair. I do this sometimes, and I declare interest that I shouldn't perhaps declare technically and strictly speaking, but I did used to work in residential childcare, and of course my partner still works in Child and Family Social Services. And I'm a long-standing friend of Mike Rapetti, who I know is in the meeting as well. So I just want to be completely open and clear about that before the meeting begins, if that's okay.
Okay, thanks, Mike. And obviously Liz can send you any paperwork that needs to be completed. Item 3 is prohibition of the whip votes and declaration of party whips. I'm not sure there's anything more to say on that, but item 4 is the minutes of the previous meeting. You've all had a chance to have a look at them and read them. I will ask if anybody's got any comments they want to make on them in terms of the accuracy. If not, if somebody would like to move them, then I would be grateful for that.
I move.
Second.
Thank you very much. Did you get those, Liz? Because I wasn't sure what I did, but as long as we got them.
I said second, somebody said third.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Before we go on in terms of that, because the letters are associated with that, we did write to Elliot after the last meeting, particularly in respect of the fact that we didn't have any information from the corporate parenting body in terms of the performance of black children at year 11 in their report. And the answer came back basically in the letter, which is on page 7 with you, is that no analysis has been done. As a result of that, I did write back to Elliot, and I notice he's not on the meeting today, but I think it's been passed on to you anyway, Julie, as I understand it, saying, whilst I appreciate that maybe assessments were not carried out as normal in terms of those comparisons, I would have thought that by and large, the year 11 results would have been looked at very closely and analysed by Education Department in that sense. I just thought results would have been available for looked after children on that basis. Basically, as everybody, I guess, in this room now is a corporate parent, we have the right and even the duty, I suppose, to ask those questions. I haven't had a response to that letter, so I don't know if there's anything with that. Julie, do you know?
I do. Apologies. I thought I'd sent something through to you, so apologies for that. So I went back to education colleagues, and the system that we would ordinarily use to pull the data off, which is a Welsh Government-run system, has paused really since the first wave of the pandemic hit. And at the moment, it's quite a significant manual exercise to pull the data off in a way that we could share, so you could see the comparisons. And we education colleagues just haven't got the resources at the moment because of the being pulled in to respond to the ongoing issues around the pandemic and changes, etc. So it's certainly something that's on our radar to find a way to be able to, but for individual children, we'd certainly look at this as part of their looked after children statutory reviews. And all of our looked after children get a card from their social worker, recognising whatever year they're in, recognising their academic achievements throughout the year. And for individual children where we may have worries or concerns, we work very closely with education colleagues to put in all the support to help them achieve the best outcomes possible in their education. It's just unfortunate at the moment with the impact the pandemic has had on lots of systems that collect data, and this is one of those systems, I'm afraid, where we haven't got the local setup to be able to pull it off in an easy enough fashion that doesn't detract staff from their efforts to manage the pandemic with education colleagues in schools, etc. So we do want to do something, but we're hoping in the new year when things die down, we can have a look at it again.
Okay, Julie, I understand where you're coming from. Obviously, times are difficult, and there's nobody's going to argue about that. I'm just surprised that it's not fully computerised and has been for years, but that's another matter, I guess. And obviously, officers know far better than I do what the situation is. But obviously, we would be pleased to hear what this. If we can get any information out of the system, I'm sure that we would want to be able to get it, be told it if we can possibly. Anybody want to follow up on that at all?
Can I add something, Chair? I'm with a different hat, and I'm the chairperson of the Education and Skills Policy Development Committee, and we had a very strong focus this year on vulnerability as we focus on education recovery. So looked after children, of course, with a very strong focus of that approach, and that will be continuing for the remainder of this municipal year. So I could provide. Well, I've got a meeting on Wednesday. I don't know whether there'd be any relevant information there, but if there is, I could pass that on in future to you, perhaps.
Okay, appreciate that, Mike. But obviously, you'll understand where I was coming from in terms of what I was saying, I'm sure.
Yes, of course.
Okay, in that case, I will move on to item 9. Unless anybody got anything else they want to say on that. Doesn't seem to be, there's no hands up. So, public question time. Have we got any questions, Liz?
No, we haven't received any.
Okay, thanks. All right, and 6 is down to you, Judy. I think it's a performance highlight report and emergency staffing. Obviously, the information we got is very limited. This time is going to cause us problems from a scrutiny point of view, because we haven't really got that much information that we can look at to see and compare performance over a period. There's some quite important information, I think, in that section that you will want to give us, and perhaps you'd like to take us through it as best we can at this stage. And if members have got any questions, obviously they will be asking them then as appropriate at appropriate time. So if I may, Julie, I'll pass over to you on this one and ask you to just take us through the data, if you would.
Thank you, Chair. So what we've reduced the amount of performance reporting for 2 main reasons. One is that we're in transition with a new system.
Yes,
staff are taking some time.
I meant to mention that. My apologies.
No, that's all right. Staff are taking a while to get used to that new system, and we've put a lot of support in, particularly for the area social work teams, to be able to record things in the right way and in the right place. And then we were hampered somewhat when the system crashed following an upgrade in October. So it set us back a little bit with our plans to get up to speed with the new system. And this has been further exacerbated, which is covered in the other report, when we've got a severe shortage of social workers in our 3 area social work teams. So what I've determined with my senior management team is what are the key performance indicators that will provide a level of assurance about the effectiveness and safety of the service that we're delivering currently across child and family services. And our best hope is that by February, we will be able to resume the fuller report. We'll be testing that in early February to make sure that it's given us accurate data, and we're satisfied that everything that's that needs to be on there is on there. And presently, we've offer a level of assurance, we've introduced some manual tracking systems. So, for example, covering things like statutory visits, child protection, so that we know that they're on time and children are being seen. So what this captures are, as it says, there are some service highlights. And what that's telling us is that if I just take you to the second page with the coloured boxes on it, is that the number of contacts into the service in October dropped somewhat, although I can tell you, having seen November's data this morning, that it's gone back up considerably. So we were anticipating that we would have more contacts in the front door once schools went back in September, and as people are starting to realise the impact perhaps of COVID, once we get a better understanding of across the whole system. So that just is going a little bit up and down at the moment. And then looking across the service, we can see that those that are going into preventative services, in other words, trying to prevent them needing any statutory intervention, is slightly down in October compared to September. And similarly, the referrals passed through to child and family services to be allocated to the area teams is ever so slightly down. But we do have quite a high number of children that are being supported by our early help hubs, which is really good for us and for children and families, because we're supporting them earlier on and preventing the need for escalation into statutory services. But overall, across the service, there are just over 1,300, I nearly said 1,000 then, 1,300 children being supported across child and family services. And then I've included some headlines there from our youth offending service. They were recently inspected, and we'll be able to bring the outcome of that inspection to a future scrutiny panel, if that's okay, Chair. We don't get the full report until February on that. But that's continued to show steady signs of improvement and maintaining the improvements that are in place. And what we are seeing, a very slight increase in prevention referrals, which is good because it's ensuring that children stay out of the criminal justice system and working with them closer to the community. Looking at the graphs, which are at the bottom of page 2, you can see that the numbers of children supported by early help has remained pretty constant since, forgive me, I need to lean in my glasses, since about May 21. And the case, the most that are open to us are children in need, 48%, but then just over 50% are open the statutory level child protection looked after, or a combination of both, where there's a dual plan in place. So the summary on the next page of the key points that we've raised is, I've mentioned about the total number of children open. In October, we had just over 800 contacts into the service. And of these, just under 350 were just calls into the single point of contact. And when that happens, what that means is we were able to provide them appropriate information and advice, or to signpost other services, so we didn't then need to convert that into consideration for referral into child and family services. So that's really good, because we were delivering the aspirations as set out in the Social Services and Wellbeing Act. That we see more direct work being undertaken, and that's because, if you recall a while ago when we kept talking about the new system WICIS, that will allow us more readily to identify direct work. So it's good that even though we can't yet get the full suite of information from the new system, that our hope around being able to see more direct work is being realised. That's really positive for us. That's really important. We've had a slight number increase of children on the Child Protection Register, although if you look at the data on page 3, it's been a considerable reduction compared to about a year ago, when we were at 234 children on the register, and we in October had just under 500 looked after children, and about the same time a year ago it was just under 570 children. So our safe lack reduction strategy, as a sort of hope from Welsh Government, could be seen to be fairly effective. Yeah. And also the numbers of less children on the Child Protection Register is indicating that we're working earlier, more successfully with children and families to prevent the need for them to go on the Child Protection Register. You'll note sort of halfway down there that the statutory visits on time or overdue was slightly down. We do, at this point in October and similarly in November, we're not confident in the recording. So although that's what we got from the system, we're having to trace and check back on social workers' recordings. So that's again something that we're working on in October, and early signs for November are we've seen an improvement in performance in terms of it being recorded on the system. And then just the other things that I wanted to add into this report that aren't there at the moment is the timeliness of assessments, because that's a key performance indicator, and the timeliness of conferences and reviews. Again, that's something that we've been working on, and I hope to be able to pull that off for the highlights report for November onwards. So would it be okay if I just pause there before I go on to the other report Paxton about staffing crisis?
Yeah, that's fine, Julie, thank you. Des, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Julie. I don't know where to start, really. Child protection, the number of children under child protection and the staffing issues all go together, don't they? To cause really concerns. I mean, bearing in mind the recent case which we were all appalled at, the young child Arthur. I don't know whether you can give a view on what went wrong there. I know there's an investigation taking place, but you must have some idea of what went wrong there, and how can you reassure us that it's not going to happen in our area? You must have envisaged that this question would have arisen today. I think it's incumbent upon us as members of this committee to ask the question in relation to children in our area.
I have to say, Julie, is certainly one of the questions I had in mind, obviously in terms of the second part of what you're going to talk about, which is your staffing crisis as well. And I think Des is absolutely right. He and I will go back a long way to 2009 when this council was put into special measures by the by the Assembly, and that was as a result of a couple of tragedies at that point in time. And obviously the department has been very successful since then. I'm sure he and I are both a little bit concerned when we see some of the information that you've got here in terms of staffing problems as well. But in terms of what assurance that you can give, I think it's a situation where you can never be 100% certain. We fully understand that, and these things can happen very sadly. But I think, as Des has said, we'd be very interested to get your sense of the situation at this point in time. I think that's fair, Des, is it?
Yes, Chair, quite that. Yeah, that's realistic. Yeah.
Would you like to come in now, Chair?
Yes, if you would, Julie.
So if I just deal with the staffing crisis first, just to offer some assurance. So we've had this emerging worry around being able to recruit social workers probably for about 2 to 3 months now. But as a whole service, what we've been doing in that period of time is pulling in other parts of the service to assist and support, so that those children that are on the register and those children that are looked after continue to be seen when they need to be seen. And that those visits that need to be undertaken do so, and that statutory reviews take place on time. So in that regard, then those risks have been managed well, both by social services and also by our partners, because you'll appreciate that for looked after children and for children on the Child Protection Register, it's a multi-agency endeavour to achieve the best outcomes possible for those looked after children and to keep those children safe from harm where they're on the register and we have worries, so that we've ensured that the core groups are happening when they need to happen for children on the register, the right partners attend when they need to. We've had improved and strengthened dialogue with our education colleagues, so we reintroduced on the back of COVID, actually, when schools went back, you remember we started to see some little worries about COVID infections increasing. So we reintroduced our weekly safeguarding meetings with education colleagues, health and police colleagues to talk about those children that we were perhaps most worried about, to make sure that we had eyes on. And I think that was one of the challenges that was raised for the case that you're referring to in Solihull was the eyes-on situation. I know that's been a real worry for social services across the UK. The real challenge and dilemma of being able to see children during COVID when the regulations and also infection rates make that extremely difficult to achieve. But I'm really pleased to say that our strong partnership approach with education, health and police colleagues has meant that we've had different ways to keep contact going with children, have eyes on with them, even when they're perhaps not in school, where they're off school age, and health colleagues in relation to, for example, midwives and health visitors. The other thing I would say is that we do regular checks of our practice at least once a week. Looking at what's come in through the front door, looking at those cases that are going to the Child Protection Register, so that we're looking at practice to make sure that we're making the right and timely decisions. And we do that in consultation with other parts of the service, across the service, but also with education and other colleagues. So it's not just us looking at our practice, but others as well. So I think that we are doing everything that we possibly can with making the best use of all of our resources across the department, and recognising that when we have pressures, we do really work well together in pulling partner agencies to assist us in doing that. When we face the challenges with the system, both in terms of getting used to it, but also when it wasn't working as well as it could, then we used our backup plans, which is reverting to manual checking. So we've had that manual oversight. So Damien, who's been to this meeting before, who oversees safeguarding and quality assurance, has been helping the social work teams to keep track manually of children, so that if we can see that a visit to a child might be at risk of going out of time, he alerts the relevant manager and his equivalent. So we've got regular oversight of that. And I'm not saying it's hard work, and it's taken a toll on the team. But what I'm very proud to say is that people have really worked well together and supported each other really well. So that has been an enormous help for those 3 areas, social work teams in particular. Because recruitment to social workers in other parts of the service isn't as challenging as it is in those teams. So our front door is held up well. The challenges have been mainly around staff sick absence due to illness, some of it COVID related, some of it caring for those with COVID. And I looked after children's team, similarly so, doesn't have problems recruiting staff. But I would say that Swansea as a system is very well placed to have good oversight of those children and young people that we're most worried about, and a good alert system to pull things together if we have those worries. We want to be sure that things aren't going in the wrong direction, and we pull things together quite quickly. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we are 110% perfect, but what I would say is that we have good systems, good people, good managers, good oversight, and good working relationships with our partner agencies, so that we can pull things together and have people in the right place at the right time where needed.
Thank you, Julie. Can I just one further to follow up, Chair? Obviously, the Arthur case has been a topic of conversation, and someone mentioned to me that they didn't think social workers had the right of entry. Is that correct? If they have concerns, do they not have the right of entry?
That is well. If we don't, we'd have to have the police to assist us to gain entry. If we knock on somebody's door, and even if they're on the child protection register, we wouldn't automatically have right of entry if they don't open the door and let us in. But that's when we call upon police assistance, and we have done that at times when needed. When we are concerned or we haven't seen a child and we need to see them, we do call upon police assistance.
Okay, Des. Mike D.
Sorry, yes, thank you. Just unmuted. Thank you. I've got 2 separate issues. I may raise them with you, Julie. The first relates to the issue of the difficulty of recruiting and so on. A long time ago, I was working for Cardiff Social Services personnel, and we introduced supplements. I think it was to recruit senior social work practitioners at the time. That led to leapfrogging. In other words, as we increased our salary levels, Middle Morgan County Council increased theirs, and so on and so forth. Whilst it might seem as an attractive short-term proposition to recruit additional staff, I wondered if there are any kind of longer-term strategies that might be able to be used. One thing that crossed my mind was whether, in fact, for example, with the training of social workers at the moment, what is the supply like? Are the colleges able to recruit staff? Are the courses full? Can we have closer links potentially with students graduating from those programs? It's just sort of thinking of a few ideas on that front. The second issue then relates to the interaction of the Youth Offending Service with the Swansea Skills Partnership, particularly one of their 2 key strategies is the Swansea NEAT Prevention Partnership. And I noticed that the Youth Offending Service or Social Services is not represented in the membership of that. That's not meaning to say that there isn't an interaction, but I wondered how many of those who end up with the Youth Offending Service have actually been NEAT at some point, and whether there's a need for greater articulation between what the Youth Offending Service are doing and the Swansea NEAT Prevention Partnership in order to perhaps, as it were, kind of head things off at the pass.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mike. So in terms of the first point, I've met with representatives from my equivalents across Wales to talk about the very challenges that you've just articulated. We do recognise we're all fishing in the same pond for social work staff, and that's true across the UK, not just in Wales. So we have also had discussions with Welsh Government about some medium and longer term strategies. So one of those would be to look at the national pay scale for social workers across Wales, so we can try and create a levelling up of that. The other thing we've talked about is how we can manage the agency market rather than them managing us. There are models in England that work quite well for a while, so that we don't outbid each other inadvertently or unwittingly, because agencies are asking for a little bit more per hour and going to the authority that maybe might pay the highest amount, so they don't control the market with us. We're very keen and we are pursuing growing our own, and we are developing stronger relationships with our local universities. I must say we do have quite a healthy flow of student social workers into Swansea Child and Family Services, but I do know that generally students enrolling to go on courses that would then lead to become qualified social workers, numbers are down, both in Wales and in England. So Social Care Wales are looking to ways that they can encourage more people to apply to go on those relevant courses. But again, that's a longer term game. But in the meantime, what we're doing as Swansea Council for both children and adult services is to support more of our staff to become qualified. And we have a number of staff that have completed year one. Sorry, my network's, am I still okay? My network just dropped out. That have completed year one, and that would, so in 2 years' time, we could have quite a cohort of newly qualified social workers that will obviously need supporting rights, and you have to keep the balance right between experienced and newly qualified. And so in the area of social work teams, we probably need a greater balance of more experienced and less newly qualified, whereas in some of the teams, but the balance could be slightly different. So we are exploring that as a shorter to medium to longer term solution, growing our own, strengthening links with universities, looking at all Wales approaches to academy models perhaps, to potentially overseas recruitment. But these are sort of things we're talking to Welsh Government about, and encouraging people to want to go on the route to becoming qualified. So the other paper that I presented are some very short-term solutions to try and stabilise the workforce. And learning from other colleagues across Wales about that they can only be short term, because if we then start to people want to become social workers, whether it's Swansea or Cardiff or wherever it might be, then we start to feel some stability, then we won't need those market supplements. But what we may want to support Welsh Government to look at is actually what do we offer as pay for our social workers, both newly qualified and the most experienced. I think that's where we would benefit from support. And then on the other point that you raised, the Youth Justice Service is hooked into the Needs Prevention Partnership through the representative from one of the senior managers, and certainly as the Youth Justice Management Board, we look at needs at every meeting, outcomes for all of the young people, both in terms of their employment, their education, and where they're living, and outcomes that they're achieving. So it's certainly, if that's not as strong as it could be, I'm certainly very keen that it is strengthened, because it's certainly a priority for those young people on the edge of or in the criminal justice system, definitely. So we'll follow that up, Mike. Yeah.
Thank you. Can I come back very briefly on the recruitment and retention issue? It's not just a question of pay, is it? It's also a question of caseload. And wondered how we're faring as far as caseloads are concerned. With obviously there's a bit more pressure at the moment with vacancies. Because it comes a kind of a vicious circle, doesn't it? If you can't recruit, the caseload per individual increases, and that then means that potentially we may be losing experienced staff, etc., etc. So I wondered if there's any measures that we could look at in terms of addressing the caseload per social worker issue.
Yeah, absolutely, and certainly our model in Swansea is that the social workers in the area teams that are dealing with more complex cases would have a caseload that would be no more than 15 children per worker, but the average we would hope to achieve 12 to 14 children. Depends on the complexity of the cases. If they have less complex, then that will be slightly different. I'm talking about children in need of care and support. So we have that as a model in Swansea that we work to. That has been challenged of late. So some of our more experienced workers may be holding higher caseloads at the moment, maybe in the late teens, and a couple of them early 20s. But because we've recruited to our 8 additional family support worker posts, and they can hold some of the non-statutory cases, children in need of care and support, I'm confident that come the new year, things will have levelled out and be in the healthier position that we were aiming for. The other good thing that we have here is a really strong wellbeing support programme, and that's been added to of late by BASWA, British Association of Social Workers, piloting a model primarily aimed at social workers, but we've encouraged them to take a whole service approach. So if there's social workers and family support workers and business support in a team, then they work with the whole team. And we're really encouraging staff to take time out to be together as a team, virtually or safely together, to then focus on them as a team and supporting each other. So yeah, caseloads is definitely one of the things that we monitor on a regular basis across the whole service, and put in support where needed, so that if people have to carry a higher caseload for a shorter period of time, what they will get with that is additional support, additional supervision, additional reflective time, so that that can help with carrying some of those additional pressures up for that period of time.
Okay. Thank you, Julie. Mike Dirk.
Oh, sorry, I thought Cyril had his hand up. Cyril? No?
I think it's gone back down again.
It's gone back down. I just can't hear you, Cyril.
You're muted, Cyril. Sorry, Cyril, we can't hear you. Sorry, sir. I think Mike, I don't know, Cyril seems to have stopped talking, so.
Should I ask my question and then go back to Cyril then, if
yes,
his technicals? It's all his Christmas firework decoration is playing up with his system, look.
Obviously. Well, he is hearing us anyway.
I do struggle with some of these, with the nature of the report, if I'm honest about it. I think that we've got, I was thinking about it earlier, and I know colleagues in the room, the virtual room, will remember Swansea putting adverts all the time in Community Care magazine, trying to recruit social workers many years ago. Golden handshakes, please come to Swansea, we'll give you a lot of money to come here. And at that time, my issue was what my issue is now. And I think that you've got to, if you're going to look for a particular bit of paper, a degree level qualification to pick people to work with child and family services, you're picking from a very narrow pool. So what I'd ask the director, Dave and Julie, is can we sort of have a breakdown of social workers? In this report it says not qualified. I've always found that term offensive, because there's an awful lot of qualifications which come to bear for social work and social care roles. And it seems to me ludicrous that you could have somebody in their early 20s with a degree who's never been a parent, never worked with children and families in any capacity, compared to someone who's 35 or 45, has done it for 20 or 30 years, and somehow the person with the newly qualified person is somehow qualified for child and family work over and above the police officer who's been doing his or her job for 15 years, or the social carer who's been in post for 15 years, or maybe even the GP or the paediatrician. You know, there's a range of qualifications. So can we have a list of the total social service, child and family social services staff team, how many social workers we've got, with length of service, what they do, where they are. There's lots of acronyms, there's lots of teams, it's all piecemeal and broken down. I'd like to see it coming together. And then can we see what roles are statutory roles that only a person with a degree or a diploma or a certificate in social work can do? Can we see those tasks laid out? Because my frustration when I was working with my friend and colleague there, Mike Rapetti, and Mike, I can't believe it is so long. I mean, but we're talking about the mid-1990s here. My frustration then, as now, remains the same. What we need is people with skills, knowledge, experience, and aptitude who can step with children and families. We got lots of those people, and I just think that we should be engaging those people into these key roles. So the crisis that we had in the 1990s that we've got now would go away. It seems crazy to me that we'd always keep fighting for people from the same pool. We're doing it across Wales. Why are we doing this? I just do not understand it. I don't, for the life of me, understand the way that social work operates in this context. So if we could have a list of these social workers, and then could we consider having like a conversion process worked out with the university to say, right, okay, so let's take somebody with 15 years qualification in social care. How can we convert them into what you would call qualified social workers? The process for me as an academic, I'd say we could do that in a 3-month period. You can convert them like that without too much difficulty. But we need that innovation and imagination, because at the moment we are taking risks with children's welfare because of a staffing issue, and that is completely unacceptable. To back up what my colleagues Mike Day, Des Thomas and Paxton have said previously, and I'd leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Who wants to come back on that one then, Julie or David?
I'll come back, and then Dave, I'm sure will want to come back. So I've adopted the term alternatively qualified. Apologies if the non-qualified has slipped through, but we very much recognise and value those roles that aren't social workers and the contribution very important contribution they make to improving outcomes for children and people, but also helping to keep them safe. And as part of our strategic workforce plan, we're very much looking at across the whole service, wherever people are now and where maybe they could be in terms of their own capabilities and aptitudes and aspirations, how we can support them to progress their career, which could be to become a qualified social worker, but alternatively it could be in other professions that exist across not just our service, but other parts of the public sector. So we very much want to embrace that whole service approach, no matter what your qualification. I'm happy to pursue, and we are with university, that how we can convert and support people to progress. That's a very live conversation. Workforce data can pull that together and provide that. That's not a problem. And I would say that what I would just say is that it's social work is not an attractive career at the moment in the UK. And it's not helped by the very poor press that generally this career receives, even when legislation quite clearly states that we're all here to keep children safe together. It's not just down to one part. As I say, it takes a whole village to raise a child, but that is readily forgotten sometimes, and the press can choose to introduce quite readily a blame culture and pointing the finger at one particular profession. And in this case, I would counter that that's had a very detrimental impact on people wanting to choose to become social workers. And as the same can probably be said of other professions about the press that it receives, and then the people's perceptions of that and how worried they feel about then working with some really complex children. What I would say also is that we've worked really, really hard as a whole service to ensure that we are able to keep children safe so that they get a timely response at the front door and they are seen on time and their assessments are completed on time, because we've taken a whole service approach and not left one part of the service just to fend for itself, so to speak. And I think that's a real strength of Child and Family Services in Swansea, that we take that whole service approach to working together and supporting each other.
Okay, thank you, Julie.
Could I come back with just one more comment, Paxton, please? Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Julie. And I can understand how difficult this role is, but I just think that sometimes the system works against itself. Overseas recruitment, I remember that about 10 years ago, where we sent people to Africa and to Germany and to everywhere else looking for social workers. It made me laugh. Honestly, I was hysterical laughing, because I was in a room with people who were fantastic. I was in a room with community workers, youth workers, police officers who would love to have rolled their sleeves up and helped out. But we went to Africa to look for them. They were in Swansea communities. They are in Swansea communities. So please look inward. Well, one thing I suggest as well is to consider 360-degree feedback, and to look at people's skills and aptitudes in that context. You know, what we've got the answers to the problems that we face, but we need to look internally. I'd suggest an urge to do that more. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think back in the days when we were into special measures, we were bringing agency staff in from Germany and all over Europe, to be honest, to try and man up. And that was a problem that's disappeared for a long time, as far as we were concerned, within Child and Family Services, because we were looking for that data on a regular basis anyway, in terms of agency staff being employed. And that has been very low up until now. Obviously, times have changed with COVID, etc., and during this running. And I assume the extra staff you're talking about in fixed-term family support posts will be coming in already within the council and being recruited from within the council. That's that's the way I'm reading that. I might be wrong, but I'm sure you can come back on me on that. But you want to come back in, David? You wanted to say something, David?
Yeah, and apologies for being late to the session, Chair. I have a little bit of sympathy with some of the things that Mike's been saying, but I'm not sure I completely agree. I mean, a couple of things I'd say is we do have literally hundreds of differently qualified staff. We've always had that. The bulk of our workforce, both within the council and in our partner agencies that we work with to deliver safety and support wellbeing in the way that Julie's described, are differently qualified. It's not that we as Julie has said, have never seen the importance of the role that they play or wanted to strengthen the part of the role that they play. But we do have some statutory requirements around having qualified social workers in particular roles, and where Julie is describing a shortfall in qualified social workers, it is for those roles that are prescribed, that there has to be that qualification, that period of training. I accept the point around it would be good if the workforce that were coming into the profession were drawn from a cohort of individuals that had worked in those in those other settings or in differently qualified roles. If that was the cohort that comes through, that cohort does come through. It's not all very young social workers, but it is there are a significant number of young social workers starting out in their career that are coming through, and then we need to nurture. When Julie talks about growing your own or growing our own, she is talking about building on the skill and quality of the work and experience of the differently qualified staff already within our workforce or within partner agencies working locally, and trying to encourage and support them to gain the qualification to help us meet the roles where it's prescribed. We have to have individuals who have this particular qualification. Julie's also described that there is some scope for some of the workload that's currently being picked up by staff with that particular qualification, that we are seeking to release some of that burden in a variety of ways, and that includes using differently qualified staff. But there is still a gap to fill, and as Julie has described, it's a national challenge. Some of the points that again you raised, Mike, aren't things that are entirely within our gift. They are the rules and regulations that are set out by national government. So part of the debate again that Julie's reference is those conversations taking place with national government about what is going to be a fit for purpose workforce strategy and organisational design and arrangements, and that might lead to some of those changes that you advocate for, Mike, and have always advocated for. It might lead to some of them, but I don't think I don't know, I suppose perhaps my impression of the picture that you were describing quite fits with my impression of how things work for us in Swansea and the investment that we've made in Swansea about valuing all staff and all staff's contribution, both within the council and working with our partner agencies. So I experience what you were saying, Mike, as I don't know, almost quite bleak, as if nothing has changed around those areas. And I think it has changed significantly and continues to change. And Julie and her senior management team are very much advocating and supporting that change, whilst being honest about they face some real challenges and are having to make difficult decisions around how do we prioritise our workload. But what she has absolutely described over and over again during this session is she and her team are making sure that we prioritise the situations where we have concerns about children where there is risk, or there is particular issues around complexity and level of need, that make sure, that need to make sure that, those are the children that rise to the top. That doesn't mean that we're ignoring the rest of the continuum of need, but we are having to stretch even further, our call upon partner agencies, how we build our own resources internally and to support that continuum of need. So I wouldn't want the committee to go away with the impression that actually, we're not focused on building as much resilience as we can across the piece, and addressing the things where where we have statutory requirements and we're expected to operate in a particular way. I remain in absolute awe of the effort that Julie and her senior management team are making.
Okay, okay, thank you, David. Could
I just say, Chair, please, David, I absolutely support Child and Family Social Services, and I share the awe, absolutely. And Paxton related to years ago going into special measures. I mean, what we've seen in this committee since I've been a councillor is breathtaking sometimes. I mean, fantastic commitment, fantastic effort. The last Child and Family Social Service meeting we had, the networking, the insights that we had, tools and techniques from the front line, I think we all found really incredible, dramatic and life-changing. So I know that, I mean, this month we've seen 50 or 60 cases closed. There's magic happening day in, day out. I think my concern is, though, that in the context of social work versus social care, that old battle is still there. British Association of Social Work and professional social work. And I just think that we need to lower the barriers a bit more. I think we go in the right direction, but we need to lower them a bit more to ensure that we enable those people with the right skills and aptitudes to graduate up to social work roles if they want to, and then backfill with the social care roles, if that's an appropriate way to do it. My preference would be to have in central government to have a root and branch review of the professional social work role. And I want to see those statutory tasks, though. That would be great if they could come to the committee, so we can see what that 15-year experienced social carer cannot do in law. You're not allowed to do those. That'd be great to see those tasks for clarity. That would help, really, because I'd eat my hat if there was anyone I was working in social care that I couldn't do personally. That's a personal note. Thank you.
That's right. I think basically this conversation really started back with safeguarding, as in that sense, and obviously it moved on to staffing, and now the staff whether the facility is staffed to ensure that we are safeguarding the children that we need to have safeguarded. And I think one of the things that I would say about that is that the progress that has been made over the last 10 or 12 years has been remarkable within the department. I think those of us who've been with us this long would agree that and would be saying that. And obviously the last couple of years haven't helped with that progress. Otherwise I think we'd have been further on along that road now again in terms of development. But one of the other things that does give me some confidence, of course, is that Julie, you came very much from a safeguarding background, as I understand it. And obviously you know exactly what you're looking for in that, to try and make sure that we are doing everything we can in that respect. I think there's been some very interesting contributions in that last session, and I'm sure there will be a few people who will go away and think about what's been said. So can I say thank you very much for that? And unless anybody's got any other questions, I will move on to item 7, which is the work programme timetable. We have got a meeting next month, which is notionally talking about performance highlight report and emergency staffing again. So whether that's going to be a repeat of what we got now, or whether you've got something else in mind, Julie, I'm not quite sure, but I'm sure you'll discuss that with Liz anyway afterwards. Budget meeting in February, and then final meeting will be in March, when we'll be looking at the safeguarding quality unit annual report. Anybody got anything to say on that work programme, or did you want to come back in, Mike?
Yeah, sorry, Paxton. It was just about the market supplements. I just wanted to ask whether the report says it's proposed to offer market supplements to the social workers and senior social workers in the 3 locality social work teams in supported care planning. offer a retention payment to the team managers and practice leads in these teams, move all newly qualified social workers to the top of grade 8 and create 8 fixed-term family support posts. Does this mean they're getting a one-off payment? So there's a one-off payment going to a select number of social workers, qualified social workers in those 3 locality teams, not to all qualified social workers. That's one question. And the other question is, are we having a similar enhancement to keep our social care frontline workers in post? Because if they leave, we've had it.
So the market supplements are going to the social workers and senior social workers in the 3 locality teams, because those are the teams that we're not able to recruit social workers to. So the basis of the supplement is to retain the staff that are there and hopefully recruit some social workers, although we're not naive to think that we will have, we'll be able to recruit all of the vacant social worker posts in those teams. So that's very much in line with the Council's current policies and procedures of offering market supplements where there's evidence of being unable to recruit. At the moment, there are no other incentives planned to retain, financial incentives planned for the rest of the workforce across child and family services, over and above that which Welsh Government has already awarded. But we are certainly having a major focus on well-being and recognising staff and ensuring staff take time out for their own personal reasons to make sure that they re-energise and recharge.
Okay, thank you, Julie. I will now move on to item 8 on the agenda, which is the exclusion of the public. Basically, we are going to discuss the tenant situation following that. It was suggested to us that it would be more sensible to do that without the members of the public being able to see it, in case any information came out which we wouldn't particularly want to have members of the public receiving, or which they shouldn't have, to be honest, rather than not that they mustn't have. But you've seen the argument that's been put forward on the agenda. Could somebody move that we exclude the public?
Yes, I move, Chair.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. And second is, thanks, Des, sorry. And the seconder?
Yeah, happy to do that.
Thanks, Mike.
I second it.
And everybody happy? Say no if you're not, basically. Silence is golden. Thank you. Okay, so that's the exclusion of the public, and I suspect in this case you'll now stop recording, Liz, if you would, please. Okay.